Greg Sankey addresses realignment talk at SEC Media Days.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply over at Gametime. I'm John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams, and live from SEC Media Days is Jay Smith. You can follow him at Unfair Sports, bringing us all the goods all week long at SEC Media Days. Now, Jay, Greg Sankey took to the podium first, and of course, realignment, conference SEC expansion was a big topic, and Greg Sankey minced very few words about it. Here's what he had to say at SEC Media Days. He says, "I pay attention. As I said, we're focused on our 16. I've said before at Media Days, I'm not a recruiter. My job is to make sure we meet the standard of excellence that we have for ourselves on a daily basis. That attracts interest. It's done that with the two universities that we have added this year. They're not the only phone calls I've ever had, but I'm not involved in recruitment." Jay, what are your thoughts to that?
It was funny because as you said that, as I said, this was the third time that he was asked this question. Like, it was three different times and potentially three different ways asking the exact same question. Hey, Greg Sankey, are you paying attention to what's going on with the ACC in Florida State and Clemson? And do you see the SEC going after them? And he let everybody know, no, we don't recruit. People come to us, right? We're the goods, not the other way around. So for him, it seemed like he felt like it was a little disrespectful to even ask that question, to question the idea that he needs to go and recruit other teams, right? We know that teams want to be a part of this conference. This is the best conference in the world. He mentioned that and emphasized that numerous times in the beginning of his speech. And so when he did the opening on there, he reminded everybody, we're at 16 teams. We're focused on our 16 teams, and that's it. What kind of shocked me, though, is we didn't hear anything about a 9-team conference play yet. That, if anything, threw your boy off.
Yeah, that was a little bit surprising. I think we both anticipated there'd be some kind of announcement. And now this is just day one of SEC Media Days. A lot to get through, a lot of just highlighting what is the current state of the SEC and the current teams in the conference. And it's just kind of fun to experience that, even though I'm experiencing it from afar. Being able to just listen to Greg Sankey talk and talk about the nature of collegiate athletics as it is. I think staying in the now, staying in the moment for this week especially, I think is good for the conference, and it's good for Oklahoma and for Texas. Getting that kind of proper pomp and circumstance, which we'll talk a little bit about that later in the show. But Greg Sankey is not going to be somebody out there talking about, yeah, we're looking to expand. Yeah, we're looking to bring in Florida State. We're looking to bring in Clemson. No, when you're kind of the top prize for most of college football, you don't put out there necessarily that you're looking to expand. It's not good business, because if you're looking to expand, then you might have to give a little bit more than what you will be willing to give in order to expand. To me, you don't lay your cards out on the table. And Greg Sankey doesn't have to. Every team that doesn't have a home or has an unstable foundation is going to be looking to get into the SEC. And if not the SEC, the Big Ten, or if not the Big Ten, the Big 12. And I'm looking at you, ACC. These are a lot of your schools that are going to be probably picking up the phone, talking to Greg Sankey about the SEC and being like, hey, what can we do? So much of it isn't even in his hands, because there's contracts that are involved that, he can't really speak to any of that anyway. So it's not surprising that he didn't come out and say, yeah, of course we're looking to expand. One, he can't really say, yeah, we're going after ACC schools. Legally. That could potentially, fire up some fan bases, but also get him in some hot water contractually or legally. And then two, again, when you've got the thing of value, you don't necessarily want to lower that value by saying, yeah, we're looking to expand, or lower your negotiating position by saying, yeah, we're looking to expand. So not at all surprising from Greg Sankey on that.
Yeah, and the way that he approached everything with it, right? Is he's basically told us if anybody's going to be the benefactor of an expansion or an added set of teams, it's going to be the SEC. It's not to enhance anybody else. It's to enhance the conference. Which that's the one thing I appreciated about kind of the way everybody spoke about the SEC throughout the first day of it with the 4 teams that came up and talked. You heard all the coaches really point out how great the conference is and how all of them work together very well. It feels like they care about the SEC more than their own organization, which, kind of lets, I think, some of the comments we'll hear from Nick Saban a little bit later, but it was very interesting on that. Like, they're in lockstep when it comes to that portion of it, right? We all know it's the best conference in the world. They play the best football. They win the most. I mean, they don't win all the time, but they win the most. And so because of that, everybody has a pride in making sure that the conference is successful. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, Sankey can't say that he's recruiting. It's illegal. And for the most part, it's going to look like there's tampering in some capacity. And the last thing they want to do is be caught up into litigation. But I'll say this, though, when it comes to this Florida State Clemson piece, yeah, I could see the SEC having interest once that is an opportunity. But to me, the Oklahoma-Texas move was perfect because that's when the TV deal came up. And they leveraged that in the negotiation with the new TV deal. So now they've got their 16 teams they said they were going for. Even Sankey said it. When we went into our TV deal negotiations, we went in talking about 16 teams. We have 16 teams. We're going to focus on what? Our 16 teams. And he reminded them about 3 times in a row, which was pretty funny.
The other notable thing, I mean, there were so many notable things, but on expansion, the thing that I found really interesting is that he did talk about the importance of having a contiguous conference, having border states. That's why, Missouri was able to make sense because they do border Arkansas and aren't very far from Kentucky, and then Texas A&M, obviously it borders Louisiana, borders Arkansas up at the corner there. So it made sense, and then obviously adding Texas and Oklahoma, contiguous conference. Now, you can stay contiguous and add some Kansas schools. You can stay contiguous and add North Carolina schools. So there's a little bit, Missouri, that takes you pretty far up into the north as well. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have my geography exactly right on what Missouri borders, because I don't really think a whole lot about Missouri. They're just up there somewhere. But that contiguous part is very interesting. And I do think it makes a lot of sense. So you don't have the situation where you have Cal and Stanford traveling across the country to play Miami in a conference game, not just for football, but for your non-rev sports as well.
Yeah, and it makes sense for Clemson and a Florida State to join if that was something that was go after. Even in North Carolina, right? I mean, Clemson, because they have a rivalry with South Carolina, so there's in the same state. So you've already got a school there. Makes sense being the even bigger brand over there or whatnot. And if you're looking at teams around like North Carolina or even Virginia, ones that are close, as you mentioned, those bordering states, Sankey was critical on that. And then one other thing that came up, which is a very interesting question, was about tiebreakers, right? With 16 teams, there's a very good chance you're going to have 3 or 4 teams potentially with 10-2 records, 9-3 records, 8-4, 7-5. There's a very good chance you're going to have multiple teams with that, and you have to determine what the tiebreaker is, especially if they don't play against each other. And Sankey addressed that. He said, look, we had a meeting with the ADs to discuss it. We're going to have another meeting with the ADs in about 2 weeks. They had a Zoom meeting. They have an in-person meeting in about 2 weeks where they'll go through all the items that are left over that need to be ironed out. And then they'll probably have a meeting one more time before the season starts just to make sure that everything is finalized. So they plan on having a tiebreaker schedule in place before the season starts, but it's something that's right now in brainstorming phase. They're discussing it together. They're thinking about it. They're trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And so that's something that's going to come down the line. And it's going to be a pretty big one because I'm really curious to how they're going to actually do the tiebreakers. And hopefully they don't put something together to where they need to change it like right before the conference championship game, kind of like, the last conference did.
Looking at you, Big 12, Brett Yormark. But you got to take time on these things. And until you have to have the tiebreakers ironed out, which isn't until like that week 1 in August, you can kind of poke holes and run through all the simulations and run through all the different scenarios to figure out what makes the most sense moving forward. So I can't wait to find out what that's going to be, because it's going to be intriguing, definitely, because we will run into tiebreaker situations. That is without a doubt. Whether it's for the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed in the SEC title game, I don't know, but we'll definitely run into some tiebreaker situations. Coming up next, Nick Saban had things to say about Oklahoma and about Texas. We'll discuss coming up next on Locked On Sooners. Passion, drive, and patience. What defines the SEC is also what keeps your ride or die alive. That is the formula for winning championships. Over at eBay Motors, they've got everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. And for your second listen, go check out the folks over at Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, or hey, Locked On Auburn with Zach Blackerby. Any of the great Locked On shows covering teams that Oklahoma will face. You might want to get you a little bit of insight into what those teams are looking like. You can do it right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Nick Saban turning from GOAT football coach to maybe GOAT analyst. We'll find out as he takes his game to the broadcast booth, and had a few things to say. Let's discuss what he had to say about Oklahoma and Brent Venables. On Venables, he said, I think he's a really, really good coach. He's a hard worker. He's an attention to detail guy. He's one of the best defensive coaches in college football. I think their roster is getting better, especially on the defensive side, which was the issue, alluding to the Lincoln Riley era, Jay.
Yeah, and I love that Nick Saban really pointed out, that Venables is a defensive guy, right? We know Saban is a defensive guy. Kirby Smart's a defensive guy who's a descendant of him. And Saban recognizes that he walked into a team that was built specifically on skills, positions, and offense, and he needed to reshape that defense. And over the last couple of years, we've seen improvements, right? No, we haven't seen the improvements that y'all want to see, where you're seeing teams only getting 200 yards a game. No, but we're seeing them give up less points than we did the years before, right? Especially being able to, we're not having a whole bunch of games where we're battling 40 to 50 in order to win the game. We have to score 50 points and they score 40 points. Last season, we gave up 30 points only 3 times the entire season, which is huge, right? Mm-hmm. That's a huge deal for people to recognize. And so Nick Saban saw that. He knows that Brent Venables is a really good defensive coach because he dealt with him in 2 national championships and a third one when they played, right? He knows that Venables knows what he's doing on the defensive side, and he's seeing that the roster is getting better, especially on the defensive side, with guys that complement exactly what Venables is trying to do. So you've heard me preach this numerous times on here, and it's the one thing I will constantly tell you. The defense is going to be the most important piece of here, and it looks like Venables has got exactly the pieces he needs in order to be successful on that side.
Yeah, we've been talking about how this defense looks like a unit that can help carry the load for this team. It's not a defense that has to be carried for a season. They are going to be winning Oklahoma football games in 2024. How long has it been since we felt that good about a defense going into a season? It's got to be a while. Now, that 2021 defense with Nick Bonito and Isaiah Thomas and Delrin Turner-Yell and Patrick Fields, those guys were good. I think they exceeded expectations, but still, I don't think they are or were to the level that this defense is going to be in 2024. with the number of linebackers that you have, the great safety depth that you have, the improved defensive line, especially at defensive tackle, Brent Venables has the guys in place for this team and this defense to ascend to top 15, top 10 status, whether in yards per game or in points per game. And that's going to be the big reason why Oklahoma flirts with 10, 11 wins this season.
Yeah, even beating the Big 12 in a conference that's known for putting up points all over the place, right? Oklahoma did really well defensively against a lot of teams that knew how to put on points. And that's where you want to get to, right? In the SEC is completely opposite, right? It's funny. I had a conversation with the Locked On Auburn guys and a few guys from that Auburn media. And the running joke about it is that they've only seen hear me out, in 2 times in their entire franchise's career, in college football history for Auburn, they've had a 3,000-yard passer. That's every year for us. That's something that we are accustomed to. If we got a 3,000-yard passer, we are losing our minds. Auburn's only had 2 ever. And they're like, man, we would love to have that. And so when you say that, it makes me think back to the era of like the Sam Bradford era with having him throw for 4,000 yards and having 2,000-yard rushers. They looked at me and said, man, I bet that was fun. I was like, no, we lost to Florida in the title game. They're like, but yeah, I bet that was fun. That's the perspective you got to think about going into the SEC. You're going to go against a lot of schools that have never had quarterback play or have probably close running back play, but not quarterback play like we had, right? You got a lot of those that have never seen a 1,900-yard rusher like we did with Adrian Peterson. You're going to see a lot of them without 2 1,000-yard rushers. I mean, Auburn had that, but they didn't have the passing game. So, yeah, it's going to be a different animal for us to where we need to recognize that, sure, we're going to pass for a good amount. We're going to run for a good amount. We've got to make sure the defense is not giving up the points. I don't care about yards anymore. Keep them from scoring, and I'm happy.
And that's what it comes down to. You won the game against Texas. Yeah, you gave up a ton of yards, but you kept them from scoring. The goal line stand, the Billy Bowman hit on Jatavian Sanders that Kendall Dolby intercepted. I mean, you kept them from scoring in big situations. That's the name of the game. Give up a lot of yards, doesn't matter. You limit them to points, which Oklahoma did a good job of that last year, and you're going to win some football games. The other thing that Nick Saban had to say, well, this was on Texas. He said, what kind of tickles me is all these people asking questions about how Texas always ran the conference they were in. They're not going to run the SEC, which is a fascinating little quote there. I know everybody wants to give Nick Saban the benefit of the doubt, talk about maybe the context in which he was speaking was more administrative or political. Whichever way you want to run with it, Texas never ran the conference. As much as people want to talk about the Longhorns were the big mover, the people mover, the team mover, whatever. Did they have a voice? Did they have a strong voice? Sure. But I very much doubt Joe Castiglione sat back and be like, Texas, just kind of do what you want. We're just along for the ride.
No, now, see, I agree with you there. Joe Castiglione definitely didn't just sit back there and say, no, this is not going to happen. But I think the context that everybody's pointing out with Saban in this is that's the reason why Texas A&M left, right? When Texas got that Longhorn network, they're like, wait a minute, y'all going to let them just do this on their own and make their own money? And the conference was kind of like, we kind of do, because if we don't, they're going to either become an independent or they're going to try to go to the Pac-12 again, which that's what they tried to pull with Oklahoma. So for us, it's kind of one of those, we know that our value is going to be high and they're going to have to pay us. Like, we don't have to push for anything additional because they understand without both Oklahoma and Texas, the brand isn't going to be as strong. Now, granted, the Big 12 did get themselves, a nice little contract where they started going ahead and poaching everybody else's teams because they recognize that, okay, we may not have Oklahoma, Texas, but we may have a great value set of teams that could do a good job and give us a solid product. And that's what's important. But truth be told, Texas is pushing a lot of people around in the Big 12, and the Big 12, they really were complicit. And honestly, that could have been the demise. The beauty of what Saban said, though, is SEC ain't going to do that. And I've said this before, and some people laughed at me when I said it. Texas will end up being an independent before they get a chance to tell the SEC what they're going to do. Why do you think the Longhorn Network is gone? They absorb that bad boy right into the SEC network and say, look here, buddy, you're a great brand, but we've got a lot of championship brands here too. We can play the same game you can play. And so Texas is going to take a back seat and just be a standard team and understand that Sure, they've got a big brand and a big fan base, but they're not bigger than Bama, Georgia, and in some parts, Oklahoma.
I mean, Oklahoma's got the success on the field. Texas might be the Dallas Cowboys of the college football, but that isn't necessarily a good thing. And I say that as a Cowboys fan. So
I know that hurts. I know that hurts all you internally.
Every time I say it, but it's the reality of the situation. Big
it's
brand,
a Texas thing.
Very little success.
Feels like a Texas thing.
It's just a Texas thing. Everything's bigger, even the hype. So did you also call all of the Big 12 additions after Oklahoma and Texas great value brands?
I mean,
or was that on accident? Or did I just
no?
You
didn't make
great value, but I wasn't sure if that was the right context.
It was great value. It was 100% great value. I mean, let's look at it. Let's be realistic. Here, right? I mean, I'm not going to
disagree with you. I just want to make sure I heard that right.
Let me put it to you this way. When I go to Walmart and I want to get some ice cream, sometimes I buy the great value version of the mint chocolate chip because it has a little bit better minty taste to it. But it's still not as good as the Bluebell or the Brahms version. But it's good. It gives you it has a little extra mint. So it gives a little different flavor. It doesn't mean that it's worse. It's just it isn't like your creme de la creme, right? And we see that 100% from the TV deals. That tells you everything you need to know, where the eyeballs are going. At the same time, who got the big stadium sizes. So yeah, I kind of did say it, but I still love y'all. I'm gonna watch the games.
I like Big 12 football. It's gonna be fun. I'll be interested to see Shadur Sanders and how many sacks he takes next year. But
same.
Yeah. So we're gonna have some more SEC Media Day takeaways coming up next. Oklahoma is getting that respect heading into the league, even if a lot of the national analysts aren't high on Oklahoma. The coaches certainly are. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. So the Oklahoma Sooners were the talk of the town, along with Texas. I'll give them their due there. Everybody wanted to ask what these coaches and players felt about the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns coming in. What were some of the big quotes of the day that you heard when you were milling around?
Yeah, Brian Kelly to Lane Kiffin all the way to Clark Lee, they all basically kind of echoed the same thing, right? That Oklahoma and Texas coming in are both big historic brands. They have strong traditions and they're going to be a great, asset to the conference, right? They're going to bring additional competition, right? And I had to say, I was impressed at hearing it basically echoed by everybody. You would think that like a corporate memo was handed out to each one of them and say, hey, just read these lines word for word, bar for bar. And they all did it. But at the same time, Greg Sankey said the exact same thing when he was up there talking about it too. So you heard the praise of each team. And it's funny because Shane Beamer was asked, of course, former Oklahoma coach, he talked about how he left Georgia after Oklahoma lost to them in the Rose Bowl. Gosh, it's just painful even talking about it. But he was a coach at Georgia at that time, and then he came over and worked underneath Lincoln Riley and that regime here at Oklahoma. And he talked about the big difference that Oklahoma's going to see coming into the SEC. And for him, the big thing is like, Oklahoma's, a big brand. They got everything. They got the history. They got all the culture and everything. The big thing is they're going to deal with a lot of big bodies week after week. And if they're prepared for that, they'll be just fine. And so, Shane gave that love there. Brian Kelly, praised just the history of the teams. He's played at Oklahoma when he was at Notre Dame. He's been in Norman, so he knows the crowd can get crazy whenever they need to. So he's like, yeah, I think Oklahoma's built themselves to the point, in years past, they've been prepared for the type of crowd you're going to have in the SEC. But the other thing that Shane Beamer pointed out that some of the coaches kind of echoed was be prepared to be infiltrated. And what I mean is when those teams come to visit, they fans travel, right? This isn't like playing against, an Arkansas State where you may see like a pepper of 2 or 3 family members in town. No, you're going to see lunatic fans in your stadium watching these games, right? You're going to have South Carolina people travel over to this side of town. If they don't live in Norman already or in the area in Oklahoma in general, they're going to be there, right? You're going to see even crazy fans from Tennessee. We saw that they traveled when they came back in, 17 and 16. We saw that they traveled. You're going to see a lot more of that creamsicle orange coming into town. And so it was the big thing of reminding everybody that when you're in SEC, There's a reason why they call it big boy football. Not to say that, Oklahoma and Texas, they never played against anybody, but get used to that week after week. And I think, to me, the infiltration is going to be a really big difference for us as fans. So make sure y'all get out there and tailgate, because I heard there was some tailgate news that came out too.
Yeah, so they're expanding the tailgate situation there on campus greatly. I wrote a story about it over at Sooners Wire. Oklahoma Athletic Department released all the details over there at Soonersports.com that you can go check that out as well. But that's a big deal, that the tailgate situation is expanding. They've heard from the fan base. They've heard from those who went on kind of research trips to SEC towns over the last couple of falls to get Norman and get the University of Oklahoma SEC ready from a game day perspective. Now let's see if they can execute that. I thought one thing that you mentioned was really intriguing. Greg Sankey talked about how when Kentucky played in College Station, they had 10,000 fans make the trip to College Station. That's Kentucky. That's really impressive. So if anything else, like, the Norman economy is going to get a big boost because of SEC fans coming to town. The hotel situation, if you're planning on going to games in Norman from out of town, you might want to get your hotel situation wrapped up if you haven't already. That might be a big deal. But it's going to be really, really exciting. You want to touch on the Harold Perkins, quote unquote, drama from the day when he was asked about Danny Stutzman? He said, "Who?" I thought that was Guardians of the Galaxy moment there.
Yeah, it was definitely that. It was a turn of the who? Star-Lord, man. International guys. It was great because, and it was very genuine on too. I listened to Harold Perkins and all of his interview or whatnot when I stood over there, and he truly is one of those guys that focuses specifically on the task at hand, what's in front of him. And I got why he said he didn't know who Danny Stutzman was. One, he's never had to play against him. Two, he'll never actually play against them technically because they both play defense. Like, why would Harold Perkins ever see Danny Stutzman tape? They're not going to line up against each other. I would totally understand if Grant Nussmeier had said that he had never heard of maybe Danny Stutzman or somebody on the defensive side. I could totally understand that. They're starting to prepare for them now. But if Harold Perkins had said he never heard of Jackson Arnold, oh yeah, I would have lost my mind. I'd be like, oh, really, bro? That's what you're doing? We're doing that today? Okay. Right. Noted. But no, there was no reason for Harold Perkins to truly know about Danny Stutzman. So I thought it was funny. I mean, it's kind of funny gag. I think that added nicely to the Jackson Arnold one, So I interviewed Jackson Arnold for a little bit. I went over to his section, asked him a question about him and Billy Bowman and how they were going. Jackson Dart, not Arnold. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Arnold. Well, Jackson's, that's why. But anyway, asked Jackson Dart about the tweet that he was going back and forth with Billy Bowman. And of course, he got a kick out of it. And he's like, yeah, just trolling, just trolling back and forth. And I know that he's a great guy, great in the secondary. And I'm looking forward to playing against Oklahoma. Gave the standard, coach speak, PR perfect answer to the question. But at the same time, they see that stuff. And I love the fact that Jackson Dart was there to have fun with it. He wanted to play around with it. And when he smiled and laughed, he's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And so he's looking forward to playing against Jackson Arnold. They became good friends at the Manning camp or whatnot because, they were all there together. And so, yeah, it was good hearing that Harold Perkins is exactly as he's advertised. He cares about football and his game, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, why would you be paying attention to Big 12 football unless you're playing Big 12 teams? And as you mentioned, he's not going to ever play against Danny Stutzman. And Harold, I know guys will watch guys that play similar positions, but Harold Perkins plays more, I think, linebacker edge hybrid type of a player.
Jack type, yeah.
And like a true Mike. And so the games aren't necessarily equivalent. I had one guy say, he's not going to know who one of the top 5 linebackers or not top 5 players at his position is. I was like, maybe not. Not everybody lives and breathes this stuff every single day, especially for a student athlete, when that's all you have to do all day is you're focusing on improving your game. You're not worried about what's happening in Oklahoma, USC, Michigan, Notre Dame. No, you're just preparing for your season and preparing for the opponents you're going to play. You're more concerned about, okay, who's the quarterback next on the schedule? Or who are the guys that I have to pay attention to this year? What are the offensive tackles I'm going to have to go up against when I'm called on to blitz off the edge? that kind of stuff. The stuff that's like within your job description, basically. It's like,
right. Or model their game against, he wants to model his game against a pro, right? That's usually the position that makes the most sense, right? Why would you model your game after somebody that's in college with you? Why not against a professional athlete? Because that's your next goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. And hey, Jay's going to have more from SEC Media Days on Tuesday as the Oklahoma Sooners get to the podium. Jackson Arnold, Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, and Brent Venables will all speak as well. So he'll have reaction. We'll all have reaction to that on our next episode of Locked On Sooners. So make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're an everydayer and you're still with us here deep in the third segment, you might want to go check out the Locked On Sooners Insider Program. You can subscribe to that by texting SEC 2024 to get 25% off your first month to 405-817-6711. Again, text SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711 to get 25% off your first month. We'll do prospect breakdowns. Jay will have some exclusive video that we'll throw into that little folder there for you, file you can get in on Q&A sessions. I already had somebody ask me a question about who is the hype man for Oklahoma football because he's got an idea for him. Well, I was like, well, that's probably Danny Stutzman, so you could probably reach out to him if you got some ideas. But hey, get direct one-on-one conversation with us over there at the Locked On Sooners Insider Program, again, by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711 to get 25% off your first month. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.
Sooner.